Just Branding. Podcast.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Just Branding. We're in for a treat this time round. Today, we are going to be thinking about branding from the inside. We have a career brander who basically has made his career from the inside. And so we've got some interesting insights and conversation to have. Who do we have with us? We have Kyle Millar. He is currently the head of marketing at SodaStream Canada. He's a purpose-driven brand marketeer with a wealth of in-house brand experience. And he's held previous roles as head of brand at Capital One, which incidentally is where I met Kyle. He's been the marketing lead at Molson Coors beverage company and a number of roles at Unilever on brands such as Axe and Dove Men. And over his 15-year career, he's worked on brands throughout their life cycle, launching, growing, stabilizing, or declining, and focusing on truly making that badge something anyone would be proud to wear. So it's really exciting to have you on, Kyle. Thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to us today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for the kind welcome, Matt and Jacob. I'm excited to be here. I know we've been having this in the books for a while. So yeah, let's get to talking. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And it's lovely to see you again since, so we were kind of colleagues, weren't we? I think you came over to the UK when we were launching a new sort of repositioning for Capital One. And I think I met you first there. And then where Marty Neumeier, who Jacob and I are big fans of, and a fellow guest on the show, actually, he was speaking, I think, if I remember, at that event. And then also, I think I flew over to Canada at one stage in Toronto, and I think we hung out there for a little bit. So it's lovely to see you again.
Yeah, no, it's great to obviously great to see your face, and your beard is still as epic as ever. So I'm glad you're keeping that going. But yeah, it has been a while. It's great to go over to the UK and obviously see some of the brand work that was happening there. I feel like any brand marketer, loves to see Marty Neumeier speak about branding. It's one of those things that you turn into a little kid when you listen to him speak. So yeah, it was exciting.
It was a treat. It really was. Great. So today we're going to be, picking into this idea of brand. And, I was saying to Jacob just before we kind of pressed record that it's interesting because we have a lot of guests on the show. A lot of them are experts, obviously, in their own right. And a lot of them operate, though, outside of businesses and advise into businesses, as it were, from the outside in. But you do your work from the inside, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested to hear your perspective on a number of topics, which we'll dig in together. And I think it would be interesting for our listeners, anyone who's perhaps not worked in-house or maybe a founder who's thinking of managing their brand and building a team in-house. It'd be great to hear some of your thinking in relation to some of those things. But perhaps before we go into all that, it would be great to have your definition of brand and how you sort of see brand and the value of it to a business.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like everyone always asks, like, how do you define a brand, right? And many people give you tons of different answers, right? From whether branding is, the logo, the colors, those kind of things. And, Matt, I know you always have a very adverse reaction to that being definition.
It upsets me.
But
I nearly was a little bit sick when you said that. I'm okay though.
Like, all right, let's cut. Here.
I kept it down. We're all good.
At a time. But it's branding to me is it's something you feel. That's kind of the only way I can really describe what a brand is. It's not a set of things that appear on a piece of paper or kind of how your TV commercial looks. And many people don't really understand kind of what that means. And brands also, it's evolved over time, what that word means. I mean, back in the 1800s, it was really about like the physical branding of something, like a burning into a piece of wood. And, over like the 50s, it was about differentiating. And the 70s, the 90s, it was like a personality, lifestyle brand marketing became popular. And then now it's this idea of like purpose-driven marketing, right? It's about creating something out of nothing. And one of the things I always talk about with brand when it comes to my teams or my agencies that I work with is a brand is very much like a friendship. As a brand, you kind of act a certain way, and that consumer will decide that they like you or not because of what you do. When you're trying to make a new friend, you don't go up to a new friend or new person and say, hey, I want to be your friend. How should I act so you and I can be friends? That's crazy. No one would do that. You just kind of act. And then if your values align, that's kind of how a friendship forms, right? And it's very much the same with a brand. You are authentic in yourself. You show what you stand for and the why. And then once again, people like that. And it's the same goes for afterwards when you become friends and you ask somebody, why do you like this person? You won't say, oh, I like it because they wear the color red. No one says that, right? But a lot of ideas of brands like, oh, the color red is really empowering. It is. It's a great way to help, show who you are, but it's not the reason why. The reason why is because of, once again, who you are. Everything comes back to that why, that purpose, and that connection standpoint. So when you ask a friend why you like them, oh, they're trustworthy, or they make me laugh. Same ideas. That's how you describe a brand, right? So looking at those from a friend to a brand, those are very kind of similar ways. And one of the easiest ways that I help to really define branding and what that means for people.
I love it. And this phrase "purpose driven marketing" is a little bit of a buzzword. Can I get you to sort of just kind of clarify that a little bit? Because I think I know what you mean, but how would you sort of define that? I mean, because in-house, I work just briefly with a few in-house teams, and I hear that phrase occasionally, and I always think I know what it means, but I'd just love to hear how you'd sort of clarify that.
Yeah. Purpose-driven marketing for me is about what's the change you're trying to have in the world, right? It is the idea of the why. Why do you stand for what you believe in? Everyone's trying to have some level of impact in the world. And purpose-driven marketing is the same thing. It's not about a brand attaching itself to, a non-for-profit or something like that. It's what are you trying to change in society? And some of the brands I've been fortunate enough to work on, Dove Men, it's one of the key ones that helps to sort of change societal views on beauty, right? That's the idea of purpose-driven marketing, of why do you stand for something? And that helps when you understand the why, the what of what you do becomes so clear. And a lot of times the reverse happens where, okay, we're going to create this. Now let's figure out why we wanted to create that. And that doesn't...
Why it's helpful.
Right? Yeah. It's why are you figuring that out afterwards? You have to understand the idea of the why, and then that why becomes crisp. Your what becomes significantly easier.
Yeah, and I guess innovation going forwards becomes easier as well because you can keep creating or redefining what you're doing to remain relevant. But the why, it should kind of stick around for a long time, possibly never change, depending on the sector and what your why actually is. But interesting. Yeah. Jacob, do you have anything?
I was going to ask you, Matt. Yeah, I was going to ask you because we hear purpose-driven branding a lot in our space. So it's kind of a bit interesting to hear Kyle talk about purpose-driven marketing. So do you hear branding more talked about in that kind of context?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I love Kyle is because he's very aligned to how I tick, right? And we got on very well, when we were colleagues and continue that relationship, as you can tell by all the insults that he's already thrown at me. But no. But the thing is for me is his purpose is core to any business that wants to stick around, right? And depending on how you define, and I don't know if we want to open this Pandora's box, but branding and marketing and how you see the two, they both should stem from purpose for sure. For me, branding is a little bit more strategic. It's a bit more high level. And I know Kyle also aligns with that concept. Whereas marketing, although it has a strategic element, is usually focused around more tactical delivery. That's what I believe. And so it's more about lead generation or actually helping to move customers through the sales, towards a sales funnel. Whereas brand is more, potentially can touch multiple areas of the business, and it's about creating experiences and innovation and products. And anyway, that's how I see it. How do you see it, Kyle? Do you see a difference in that? Or
yeah, no, very similarly. And once again, brand is that idealistic place you want to be. It is where are we trying to go to? What is that 30,000 foot view? Marketing gets into the usual 4 Ps. And I always make this joke about I spent 4 years at university studying marketing, and the only thing I remember is those 4 Ps. It's the only thing I remember. But that gets very tactical. And when marketing and branding become interchange words, you lose the meaning behind them. Marketing is that idea of how are we going to show up in that tactical point, that moment of truth. What's the price? What's the product? What's the place? What's the promotion? Those are great, but that won't actually define what your brand is. It's just helping you convert. Branding is the feeling. Once again, it goes back to how do you feel when you see that brand? And that really is kind of the most important thing. And one of a paper I read a few years ago really kind of helped me understand this even better. We as humans aren't rational creatures, right? Where we like to believe we are. We like to think we look at numbers and cents and all that stuff, and we're like, yeah, well, this makes the most logical. But in reality, we aren't. We grab something because we feel something in it, and then we backwards rationalize it. Oh, I bought this because it was on sale. No, in reality, you just liked that there was a bald man on the logo, and that's why you bought it, right? And that's very true. That's how humans work.
What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? I know I'm losing my hair, but man. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But it's this idea though where branding is the feeling, right? And that's what goes back to and I love that Marty Neumeier talks on that a lot, right? It's the feeling that people give to your brand, and that's what's so hard to do. Marketing actually is easy. Branding is very hard, and branding for me is the challenge that gets me up every day, because it's so many factors that have to be looked at consistently to make a brand powerful and sustain throughout time.
So I'm curious, with the roles that you have, like how much are you working on that branding phase before you go into that tactical phase, like bridging that gap?
Yeah, so branding is kind of the first step, right? And it goes back to the why, right? Why are we here? And then if you don't have the idea of where you're going, well, you need to create that first. And it goes back to the thought of, is there a change we want to have? What do we believe in as a company? And you don't have to find necessarily always the white space. And a lot of places talk to the idea of white space. Well, there's no one's focusing here. Well, a lot of the best companies that have been created in the past couple of years aren't about finding something totally new. They've taken an existing industry or idea and they've just tweaked it a little bit to create the idea of why behind it, and really just driven the idea of why home. So when you first articulate the why and you understand that, well, then everything else kind of falls into place, to say, but becomes easier. It helps you understand what you're going to say yes to, but more importantly, what you want to say no to. And that for me is the guardrails, right? And that then allows you, so when you're going through planning of a brand in your future set, I like to look 3 to 5 to 10 years out, saying, what are we looking at right now? And then what are we looking at tomorrow? And then 10 years down the road, and that can drive to everything to innovation. Because then if you can figure out where you want to be, you then kind of backwards engineer, okay, what needs to happen? What are the milestones that really go into that? So a lot of the things when I brief an agency, I like to give that context of where we're going to go. And for me, a vision statement is so important. And I will spend months trying to figure that out. But it's really easy to make a bad vision statement. It's super easy. Like you can just throw anything on a piece of paper, feels like a vision, great, we're done. But making it simplistic is so important, right? It's like what's the old saying that goes around where it's I didn't have enough time to write you a short letter.
Yeah.
Like it's brilliant. But
Jacob uses that literally all the time.
I love it.
He loves that.
I do love it.
Now going to be best.
But it's true. It's like when you have a really crisp vision statement, it helps to block out all the noise that's around you and all the trends. And as a marketer or a brand individual, you have all these new hot trends that come along, and every kind of person is trying to sell you on, hey, have you jumped on TikTok? Is that right for your brand? Should you be doing that? Is that part of your vision? If it is, then great, jump on it. But if it's not, then why? Why be distracted by it? Just because it's a hot trend doesn't mean it has to be right for you. So I think, Jacob, to your question, branding the branding idea, that why is sort of the first thing. And if you can't articulate that, then you need to spend a bit more time before that goes. Now, if you already have a brand, you know what you want to do and what that stands for, it becomes a bit easier, because then you sort of say, okay, we're going to go and do X and then Y and then Z. that helps you kind of ideate. And once again, where your brand is on that kind of that consumer journey, or that brand timeline of, are you growing, are you declining, are you stagnant? That also helps to really inform that. So it really just comes back to, I probably said the word why already like 8 times in the past 10 minutes, but that's the crux for me. And my team probably gets sick of me because I always ask why about 50 times in a meeting. But that's once again, it understands what makes someone tick.
100%. So can I ask you about like misconceptions about this why and the purpose? Because often we do talk about purpose and like the why, but like what are the mistakes you see from, I guess, inside a company that you often come across?
Yeah. So why in branding, actually, branding in general is usually just deflected to, it's the marketing team's responsibility. And I think that's the single biggest misinformation or misconception that exists in business today. Branding is owned by everyone. It doesn't matter what your function is, doesn't matter if you're internal or external, what you do. Branding is the entire company. And if you're,
it should be, right? I totally agree with that. But how weird is it that people don't have that, particularly leadership doesn't, well, I say particularly, in my experience, a lot of leadership, they need to get used to that idea. Once they get it, they're like, flip, like we need to do this, right? And they double down on it. But at first, a lot of engagements I have, like people are like, what is this brand thing? Isn't this really fluffy? And, how does it relate to me over here in product development? It's like everything. It's everything to you.
It is the personality of what you're building. It's the DNA almost of everything. So if a leader ever comes out and is like, oh, this brand stuff is just fluff. It's basically saying, I don't care about the ins and outs of my company. I just care about profit and loss. I just care about getting through the day, hitting my targets. Great, you can do that for a little bit, but at the end of the day, a brand only comes to life when the people who actually live, breathe every day align to it. And that helps to set, once again, goals. Your brand can help you to set your financial future. It can help to set your recruitment, your resourcing, how you're going to approach it. It goes to everything. It's not just a comm strategy. It is, like I said, it is everything that goes about, and it helps to identify how you want to operate with your suppliers, how you want to operate when it comes to recruiters, how you want to operate when it comes to sales and your partners. If you're in a retail space, that's also another part of your brand. It's not black and white. It's we operate differently because we believe in something differently. This is who we are, right? And people buy who you are. They don't necessarily buy what you sell. And that, I think, is 100% true.
Love the little subtle Simon Sinek kind of, little drop-ins there. It's so good.
Have to.
Big fan of Simon. One day we'll get Simon on the show, and maybe you can join him, Kyle. And
I'll just join. I'll be a non-video member and just I don't care. You just have to see me. I just want to hear it live.
So I was going to say to you, we want to dig into the Inhouse, I guess, world a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think probably a good way of us doing that is to kind of ask you to kind of tell us a little bit of your story. Obviously, in the intro, we went through kind of what happened, the high level stuff. But like, would you be okay to sort of talk us through a little bit of that story? And I guess maybe not the details, but maybe some of the things that you found, work really well in-house from a brand perspective, and some of the things that work less well. And, you don't have to give names or specifics because we obviously don't want to get in anybody, including Jacob and I, into any legal problems or anything. But just kind of things that you've learned along the way. I don't know if you can tell that as a narrative, and if not, then just kind of bullet points or whatever. But that'll be really interesting, I think, for folks to hear.
No, it's great. So I live most of my careers, I define it as like, I'm a person of 3. I always believe there's 3 roles to everything. And I have 3 roles of great branding that actually comes to life. So the 3 are, it's simplicity, consistency, and authenticity, right? Everything a great brand does needs to do all 3 of those. And that's been true throughout my career now. I started my career at Unilever. And Unilever it still is a fantastic place. It helps to establish the foundations for great brand marketers. And the brands that you get to work on there are some of the best in the world. And really, that was the first place that helped me identify the idea of consistency. And you have these brands, when I was working on Axe, that is a brand that is the same all over the world. It is about giving guys confidence, right? That is the crux of it. How they communicate it can be different country to country. In the UK, it's called Lynx.
Yeah, same in Oz.
Yeah, right. So it's Axe in North America and Lynx in other parts, but it's, it goes to show you, you have a different brand name, but the essence of the brand is still confidence for guys. And that's consistent throughout the world. And what allows for that is, once again, a really clear idea of what is the purpose of the brand, what is the vision of the brand, what are you trying to help, in this case, what are you trying to help guys do? And that, for me, is how you drive that consistency. And if you continue on that, you're not having to remind people who you are. They instantly know. It becomes, once again, a badge. And that is really, really critical, especially in young guys' life, when it's in your bathroom, right? It is a badge of who you are. And if somebody's over and they see it, they instantly know what type of person you are. They instantly know the values of who you are. And that's really, really critical for me. The second one around simplicity is another one for me. And I've said this before, but simplicity helps to block out the noise. It helps to be really steadfast in what you believe in. One of the brands, when I was innovation manager at Unilever, this was not a successful launch. The launch was successful, the brand was not. And really, this brand fell to the challenge of not being simplistic and clear in what it wanted to stand for. The messaging became garbled. There were almost too many cooks in the kitchen at one point. And because of that, the consumer felt confused. They didn't know what that brand was standing for. And that became a challenge for the marketers to understand, how are we going to find success? Then what's year 2 look like? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? And the brand eventually did become discontinued. But that was a great lesson for me, as I was the innovation manager leading that it became too confusing. And as a marketer, I couldn't even explain it. So how am I expecting somebody else to understand that? I remember briefing my agencies, and I'm a huge one on having a clean brief. I love having like a 1-page brief, and that's it. You walk away, and that's the perfect gift. And my agencies right after were like, "We don't understand your brief," and I was like, "Oh, something's wrong here." So that kind of what led into my idea of consistency and simplicity. And then lastly, around authenticity is my third. And authenticity just goes back to every single part of the organization. Are you going to act the way that you say you're going to act, or are you just trying to once again jump on that trend? So when it comes to working on brands that are purpose driven, authenticity is key. And a lot of brands that try to attach themselves to purposes or meanings that aren't authentic to them, it's like two magnets that are just they just can't come together. When I was working on Molson Canadian, and Molson Canadian, for those listeners, Molson Canadian is like the beer of Canada, right? It is synonymous with everything you think of when you think of Canadians when it comes to being cold, hockey, like Canadiana, right? In a bottle. That's the only way I can really describe it. And one of the authentic things that we really want to do on the brand is just own hockey. And that's authentically who we are. And we supported grassroots initiatives from hockey rinks, getting young kids into hockey. How can we support the local rinks? How can you support local communities? And that's something that authentically Molson had always done, and it still does to this day, because they believe in that. And that's one of the whys behind why they operate. And there's always this saying at Molson that there's always 3 people in a town. There's always a mayor, a priest, and a Molson rep. And that, if it's true or not, I love that idea, because it comes down to they're authentically living that value, that purpose. And that's really, really important. So those are kind of my 3 rules that I'd learned over time working on multiple brands. One of the biggest challenge I'd say within this space is when you have too many people trying to input their own views into something. Now it's great. I believe a good idea can come from anywhere. But when you're having people from all different functions trying to weigh in on something without a reason for why, that's where it kind of gets muddled, right? And that's why it's important to have that sort of that crisp alignment. I think alignment's key. That's one of the biggest things.
I'm so pleased you said that, because I really agree. And I was going to sort of that was literally my next question. Like, how do you get that alignment? How do you, because obviously if you're working in-house, you've got your role, your position. If suddenly you say, hey, everybody, let's all align around this brand thing, they might, I imagine, will be like, well, who are you to lead on this? Why do we have to kind of get involved? I'm over here in HR. Like, what's that got to do with anything? So how do you get that buy-in and that kind of drive and connect with those people to make that happen?
Yeah, honestly, the best type of way to gain alignment is creating it inside out. That is about not having one person say, hey, here's what we're going to stand for. Go do it. Because everyone will be, I don't really believe in that. Once again, the best brands are the brands that are led by the people who work at the company, who work on the brand, and that's everyone ingrained. So that's why the places that I feel could be more successful are the ones that believe that marketing owns brand. It's not. It is everybody owns that brand. So gain alignment is, and I've done this in the past, and I did this one of my past roles when we were trying to create what's the idea of our brand, what's the purpose that we're gonna. I created, with the help of my team and my agencies, this kind of almost this deep dive into us as a company, as a culture. And a lot of times that's the first step, and that's usually skipped. Where there's times where I've worked at other companies, and their first step is, let's do market research. Let's look at consumers and see what they are. And it's great. That definitely should be done at some point, but not as step one. As a company, you need to understand, what do you value? And when you bring people in through, and I'm a huge believer of collaboration, when you bring other people in, whether that's internal or external, to help you build that idea, it becomes infectious, because then everyone has a little bit of it. Everyone has their say. They feel like they have skin in the game. So gaining alignment, Matt, is critical, because then people want to see this succeed, and then it becomes just part naturally of the DNA.
Absolutely. You've articulated that so well. And, this idea of collaboration and swarming and workshops and, connecting with people, I 100% agree, and I always say, I don't know what you think about this, obviously, from your perspective, but I always think that I don't exist with my clients to come up with all the answers. Like, we're going to come up with answers together. That's the aim of the game. And it's not about what I think or just what one person thinks. It's about what we collectively think. And the skill I often find is trying to find ways that we can make decisions as a group. And that's the challenge. But that's where good workshop design comes in, and good research and aligning over things in layers, like you've been talking about, like kind of like why or the purpose, and then we can go on into activating that, and there's obviously various functions that need to kind of align to that. So there's usually layers involved in the thinking. And I know when we met in Toronto, and I know we were both part of I was experiencing some agile working in a corporate level at scale. Like, it was insane. Like, I was so impressed by the speed by which, if an issue arose in any of the marketing teams, it could get up to leadership by 12 o'clock noon any one day and be on somebody's desk to be dealt with, and back down the chain, past multiple layers. And bearing in mind, the company that we were sort of working for was huge. How do you take that kind of approach? I know obviously we've both experienced it, but do you take that approach into your teams, that kind of agile way of working? So, in terms of executing after you've got a strategy, like, how do you sort of find the best way of activating some of these things what's the best way to proceed with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is still true in how I operate today. It's the idea of empowerment, right? And empowerment's only enabled when the team understand what we're going after. And when you don't have, once again, that clear goal, empowerment becomes really difficult, because if you give empowerment without a clear goal, people start going in other directions. So with my team, that I currently have now, they are empowered to make decisions. I'm not there to give approvals or to say, yes, tick the box. It's very old school in that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
The idea of, here's what's happened, here's the decision I made, and here's the learnings maybe that I've come out of that. Right. And it's this idea of, for me to be informed, but not making a final decision. And the team, once again, it's skin in the game. It's the idea of, I helped to build this brand. I want to see this brand succeed. And I feel like I can make change. So when it comes to the idea of, when you have to kind of rally behind something that's a challenge, the team can do that easily because they're able to jump in, because they know they have the ability to make that decision. And that goes not only for my team internally, but also the partners that I work with, having them help to get the best, right? And that empowerment sometimes becomes, marketers almost become this gate for your agencies, where agencies will come to you, you're the final gatekeeper, you're the yes or no. And that's how I think great ideas die, is if you can't empower somebody to make a decision, well, then why are you working with them? If you don't trust them, then you maybe should question what that relationship actually is. And that, I think, is another key, where I remember early in my career, I was always told, the agencies that you work with, they care about your brand, but not as much as the marketers will. But should we then find partners who will? And that is really, really important especially if you're doing an agency search, for example, and you're in-house. Like, those people who live your brand, they need to live your brand just as much as you do.
This is why I wanted to have this conversation, because your sort of approach and the way that you see the world, I think, is, as you say, you talked about old school there, but a lot of people are stuck in that old school, right? A lot of people are stuck there. What would you say to them? Like, how do you prize that power out of somebody's hands and say, look, empower others? How do you do that? Or can it be done? Like, have you seen it done where you've maybe worked alongside someone and sort of helped them do that?
Yeah, it's a great, that's the $1 million question though too, Matt. If I could crack that, I'd probably be on a private island somewhere. Yeah. It really is the idea almost of how can you get someone to trust somebody, right? And that, it goes back to empowerment, it goes back to belief, it goes back to what you're going after. But with somebody is sort of stuck in the old kind of way of thinking of everything needs to come through me, that's where my reverse question comes back to, well, why don't you trust them to make that decision? And that, once again, then goes back to, then should you be working with them? And I use, when I was talking with some other of my friends who work at other companies, and we're talking about what's the return to work strategy here for COVID, after COVID. And a lot of them have said, well, a lot of places want you to come back into the office. It's probably going to be 5 days a week. And what arose from that was the idea around, well, they don't necessarily know if they can be trusted to work from home. And then my question goes back to, well, then why are they working with you? If you don't trust them, should they be working with you? It's the idea of trust in every kind of facet. And then on the other side of all that, I always think that people who are in charge, and I'm one of those people, sometimes look on the bad side of, well, what happens if they make the wrong decision? And then you start going down this spiral of like, this could happen, that can happen. But they never flip it on the other side and think, what happens if that decision is right? What happens if that makes your life so much easier and you just unlock huge amount of growth? And I think in my SodaStream right now, we're seeing huge growth because we're empowering our teams, we're empowering our retailers to help us, right? And that really is the idea of empowerment and trust. So if a leader ever comes to me and says, I don't want to relinquish that control, it's usually there's a core reason why. There's usually a challenge around the belief of trust. So helping that is definitely key. I'm not sure if I was able to clearly articulate that, but like,
oh man, that was great. We're getting such good advice here, and I hope Jacob's listening, right? Because I've been trying to get him, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of trickling down into culture, like what's embedded in the culture, and this kind of shows how the values that you establish in the beginning, like the why, really does, like you said, empowerment and trust. Like if they have values of the company, that will trickle down all the way down to culture and then eventually innovation. So is that kind of where you're seeing this, or how you think about it?
Yeah, culture is everything, right? And when I join a new company, I always have a usual deck that, you know, every person runs through, like, here's my family, here's my 2 kids, here's my passions in life. But I always kind of finish off any of those kind of intros into really understanding, like, here are the things I'm good at, here are the things I'm bad at, and this is me, like warts and all kind of thing. And, you know, early in my career, I had a manager, and his perspective was, you should be very professional. You should always show your strongest self, never show weakness. I probably show weakness every single day.
Well, I love that you shared the mistakes you made earlier and like what you learned from it and how you grew from that experience. I love that.
Yeah, it's hilarious where every company is like, oh, we embrace failure. No, you don't. You like the idea of embracing failure. You don't actually like failure. Finding a company that actually says, if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. Come back and tell me what you learned about. That's a beautiful company. That's a beautiful brand if you can find that, right? Not taking yourself too seriously. And that's within my, you know, all of my teams, why I don't kind of hold that final yes or no. It's to give them the right to go and make a mistake and then come back and say, hey, this didn't work. Here's what we're gonna do next time. And that's fine. That's how you get to greatness, right? Like, how many shots did Michael Jordan miss? You never talk about that. You talk about the shots he hit. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like, he had to miss those shots to make that shot. And that is so important when it comes to culture, is, once again, trusting your teams, giving them empowerment, and building a culture that is okay to fail. And I think that kind of starts at the top. As a leader, especially, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. And Matt, I love that you're saying, like, you're not brought in as a brand consultant to give them the answers. You're there to help, to facilitate, and your ideas might be wrong. My ideas are wrong all the time too, but that's fine. That's how you build stuff. Once again, things aren't created perfectly. They're created, and then you try to make them perfect.
For sure, and definitely in a strategic space. Although you not one person can own that, as you say, you got to get buy-in from everybody, and you got to mold that. And you might set the direction, you might set the foundation of the why, but then as it gets executed, you might need to look at the way that it's being executed to bring it back on track. I think that everything you've said is so insightful, and I think it's brilliant. I just wanted to ask you a question, because this comes up from time to time, at least in my line of work, in terms of setting up teams, and you've worked in-house for all of your career. And I just wondered if we could sort of shift gear into, a little bit of sort of practical org structure kind of style stuff. So like, let's say you had a company and they were thinking about getting some brand management and getting that to kind of connect with their marketing a bit better. And, maybe some of these other areas that we were talking about. How do you, what are your thoughts on sort of org design and in an ideal world, what have you found kind of works well?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess here's the cop-out answer. It depends, right? It depends on what is the purpose of the company. Where does that brand currently sit? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? Is it declining? Like, what do you need? The usual, like, in today's sort of world, I'd say, is most companies, when they're forming, it's all about growth marketing. That's the very first thing that everything gets focused on. What is that conversion level of the funnel? And just all in on that, right? And if that's the stage you're at, that's totally fine. That's 100%. I don't necessarily always think that, as a brand, you need to have the beautiful campaign, the beautiful, Dove campaign for real beauty. You don't need that from the start. That can come. That's important. You still need the why, though, right? You still need that part, but you don't necessarily always need to communicate it through a beautiful piece. So growth marketing and growth marketeers are critical. And those small conversion pieces that people look at, that I think a lot of people kind of throw away as maybe nothing, is still hyper important. It is your first window into a brand. So that's kind of the first one, when you're small and focusing on that. The best kind of structures that I've always looked at has been ones that look at strategy and execution, right? And how they work together. I believe that as anyone who's looking to be great in brand and great in marketing needs to understand both sides of the coin, right? And I usually like to start people in the execution side first. You understand reality. You understand kind of what can happen and what doesn't, and then move to strategy. And every marketer I talk to, whether it's people who are fresh out of university or people who are trying to shift into this, their answer is, I want to do strategy for brand, but you don't necessarily know how that works yet. You don't know kind of the ins and outs. So having somebody understands feet on the street to then actually help to create that brand vision is super critical. So those are kind of the two functions I always look at. Now you can divide that as much as you want. You can look at having a research team, an insights team, another team that focuses just on PR, like whatever your type of brand is and how you find the best ways to connect. There is no kind of one size fits all, but it is important to once again look at, here's the brand that we are creating, or the company, however you want to spin it. And then here are the best ways that we feel as a brand we are going to communicate. And this is how we're going to do that. So it goes back to, what are the needs that you need, and then building a team around that. But I'm a strong believer in those kind of two functions of strategy and execution are critical to any successful brand.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're coming slowly towards the end, which I'm really gutted about, because this has been such a great conversation, and I love your take on things. I always do, but it's just great to have a chance to kind of grill you, which is an odd experience, because of it's rare that you get this in your career, to kind of go back over an old colleague and just like kind of pick their brains about stuff. But I kind of think it would be great for our listeners to hear any of your kind of, do you have any top takeaways, top tips around brand management that you want to kind of leave us with?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a few, right? It's, first off, is being really clear, right? Be really clear about that why. And that will take you the longest amount of time to articulate, to craft, and to really align people to that. And that should take you the longest amount of time. Because if you don't have that, you're just going to pay for it later on down the road. So as anyone who's working in the brand space, in the marketing space, whatever it is, focus on that. And it doesn't have to be because there's a target market over here, or because you need to be different or differentiate from your competitors. It's be distinct, right? You can have the exact same product as somebody else, but if you're distinct and you know that why, you're head and shoulders above everyone else. Being consistent. And that's the second part for me, is how are you saying the same thing? One of the things I've always found in my career with people has been, marketers get tired of the campaign before people do. So most of the time, yeah. we live that every single day. I've seen the same commercial like 50 times before it ever hits TV or hits digital. And I'm bored of it already, and it's just launched. So I'm like, let's do something new. Where a consumer hasn't. So you want to do something new and change it and do all this stuff. You have to really drive the idea of consistency. How are you letting that kind of breathe? How are you kind of driving that idea of, this is who I am, this is who the brand is, to really kind of come through. And then lastly, once again, it's being authentic. So those kind of three rules for me. Authenticity continues to be such a key one in this space. And it's not just about what you say, it is about what you do. And that should permeate every single touch point you have with people. Not just with your communication, your product or anything like that. Like, those have to be there, of course. But it should go into every single function that you do. Once again, how do you operate when it comes to your hiring, when it comes to your sales team, when it comes to your operations? Like, if you're not authentic, if you're not true within that space, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. So I think it's so important that as anyone who's looking to work with somebody who's an internal in-house, or if you are currently in-house, looking at the kind of those three things and really kind of driving those ideas home of simplicity, consistency, and authenticity.
I love that. And in-house, I think, having been in-house, I do think you get more time to work with people on that and to really usually, I mean, it depends on the setup, right? But you do have a little bit more time. Whereas if your agency is sort of only glimpses of time with leadership and with clients, and, you've got to take those principles, and I think they work either whether you're in-house or not. They're universal, but you have less time often to kind of hammer those home. So it's would you agree with that? I mean, I know you've been in-house most of the time, but do you think you get that time?
I actually believe so. Like the old way I was trained was, you give a brief, you give the agency teams 4 weeks to come back with their first idea. Every agency gives you 1, 2, 3 ideas. The middle one's always the best one. So they sandwich it together with 2 bad ideas and the best ones in between, right? It's a terrible model. Like, who created this model? I'm a big believer, once again, it goes back to, my agencies are an extension of who I am. I should, if my team ever comes to me and they say, hey, Kyle, I need more time on something, I'll say, okay, like, help me understand why. And then, of course, most of these deadlines are just make-believe. I just made them up because I want to have it by X date. If my agency ever comes to me who's out of house and says, we need a bit more time here, the challenges, most of the time I'll say 100%. Of course, you need more time. I'd rather you give me something beautiful than something to hit a magical timeline. So for me, it's one thing. It goes back to, let's have an open line of communication to help to build on that. But I'm also another believer, after I give a brief to my team or to my agencies, I will always have a touch base with them prior to like the big reveal presentation. I hate the big reveal. I hate it. Like, my advice to anyone who's listening to this, who does this, stop doing it. Like, it's not enjoyable. Like, as a marketer, you're like, I better like this because you spent 4 weeks doing it, where I'd rather be brought along the journey. And it goes back to the same idea. When you're creating a brand in-house, don't have a big reveal, just build it together. And that, I think, is collaboration, right? It's so important. If like Matt, Jacob, like for you guys, like, you probably have those great clients that you've worked with. And I bet you those great clients are the ones that have probably worked in tandem with you, not the ones that have been go away for a few weeks and come back to me.
100%. I don't do big reveals. I agree with you. I canned them a while ago, and I like to work developmental and swarming and people together collaborating. As you say, it's just the best way, because otherwise all the pressure, like I do. I mean, but in the past I've done whole pitches and the whole narrative and all that stuff, and I've not been terrible at it, but as you can imagine, with my gift of the gab. But the issue with it is that if you get it wrong, oh my days, or if someone doesn't like it, like, it's like being stabbed in the heart. If you've, as you say, done work for 4 weeks, and then some person, like, just you present it to them and it's just they don't like it, or they point some massive flaw out which you would never have known, and then you just feel really stupid. Whereas if you'd have shared stuff along the way, that gaping hole in your thinking would have been picked up on. So it as you say, it just makes more sense to partner with people. What do you think, Jacob? What are your thoughts?
I love the phrase "build it together," and I also agree with that, especially in the early phases when you're trying to get that information out of them and facilitate the conversation. So I 100% agree, especially in the early phases. I think at least in my experience, I find once you get to a stage and you go off and, like, I'm more in the design space, so you get this strategy, then you go into the executional side of things in terms of if it is the identity or the website or whatever the next deliverable may be. That's when, hey, we can do a little bit more of a story reveal. So that's kind of like how I have experienced it.
Yeah, there's ways of doing that, though. I think I find I sometimes partner with an agency at the moment, and as a strategist, they wheel me in for particular projects. And what I find is they're really cool, because what they do is they create like a mood boarding process. So it's still collaborative, but they haven't like done loads of execution or created a massive concept. Like, the strategy has been developed. Yeah, there's obviously reveal and check-in meetings, but there's ways of building into the process. Perhaps ways where old school, it would be like Mad Men, wouldn't it? And like Don Draper would like rock up with with an easel and put the concepts there and really give it like a show. Whereas I think now you've got to be quicker, you've got to be nimbler, and you've got to take feedback on board and mold things exactly as Carl said, together, even if you're in an execution phase. But even more so in some of the things that we've been talking about around the purpose and the why. Brilliant. So, Jacob, have you got any final questions for Kyle?
No final questions apart from where people can find you.
You can find me online. So if you want to find me online, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way if you want to connect with me, or if anyone has any kind of questions they want to ask. My personal Gmail is millarkyle, MILLAR, KYLE, gmail.com. I'm happy to answer questions. I love talking about branding, as I probably have capitalized most of this time with you guys and me just listening to myself talk.
That's what it's about, though. That's what it's about. Imagine being a guest on our podcast and not speaking.
Well, I had to migrate from Matt for some point because, that's usually his role. So I thought we'd switch it up.
Well, the podcast is called Just Branding, so I think you're in the right place.
That's perfect.
For sure. We've really appreciated your time, your energy, your expertise, and your insight. Thank you so much for coming in today. We wish you all the best, and we'll keep tabs on you, and no doubt we'll check in as time goes on. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate the time. And Matt, great seeing you. Jacob, great to meet you virtually, obviously, but It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.